So it has been a while since I read the last chapter of Tess of the Double Wheels, and I really want to finish reading this because it is such a good book, a good book. It's got really pretty font, really pretty texture, and yeah, it's been a while. Alright, I had forgotten that Tess of the Double Wheels has a subtitle called A Pure Woman. That means it's definitely going to be an irony on what a pure woman is. Alright, here we go. It has it has 7 phases, or it has got 59 chapters. That is exciting, is that not? Alright. The chapters are rather small, but I really want to go chapter by chapter, so let us go now. Chapter 2, Tessa, the Double Wheels. The village of Marlot lay amid the northeastern undulations of the beautiful Vale of Blakemore, or Blackmore, aforesaid, an engirdled and secluded region, for the most part untrodden as yet by tourist or landscape painter, though within a 4 hours' journey from London. It is a vale whose acquaintance is best made by viewing it from the summits of the hills that surround it, except perhaps during the droughts of summer. An unguided ramble into its recess in bad weather is apt to endanger dissatisfaction with its narrow, tortuous, and miry ways. This fertile and sheltered tract of country, in which the fields are never brown and the springs never dry, is bounded on the south by the bold chalk ridge that embraces the prominences of Hambledon Hill, Bulbarrow, Nettlecombe Tout, Dogbury, High Stall, and Bugtown. The traveller from the coast who, after plodding northward for a score of miles over calcareous downs and cornlands, suddenly reaches the verge of one of these escarpments, is surprised and delighted to behold, extended like a map beneath him, a country differing absolutely from that which he had passed through. Behind him the hills are open, the sun blazes down upon the fields so large as to give an unenclosed character to the landscape. The lanes are wide, the hedges low and plashed, the atmosphere colourless. Hence, in the valley, the world seemed to be constructed upon a smaller and more delicate scale. The fields are mere paddocks, so reduced from this height their hedgerows appear a network of dark green threads overspreading the pale green of the grass. The atmosphere beneath is languorous, and is so tinged with azure that what artists call the middle distance partakes all of that hue, also of that hue, while the horizon beyond is of the deepest ultramarine. I'm so sorry for um, the way I'm speaking, I guess, where I'm unable to pronounce certain words. It sometimes it happens that way, that I am unable to pronounce certain words um, correctly, even when they're very familiar to me, even when they are used in everyday life. Yeah, everyday life. So yeah, forgive me for that, but I really want to read this, and basically we are friends, right? So we are reading together. Like, I'm reading it out to you. So yeah, it's not a compulsion, a job for me to read. I really wanted to make that clear. I'm reading to a friend, right? Yeah. Arable lands are few and limited, with but slight exceptions. The prospect is a broad ridge mass of grass and trees, mantling minor hills and dales within the measure, such as the Vale of Blackmore. The district is of historic no less than of topographical interest. The Vale was known in its former times as the Forest of White Hart, from a curious legend of King Henry III's reign, in which the killing by a certain Thomas de la Linde of a beautiful white hart, which the king had run down and spared, was made the occasion of a heavy fine. In those days, until comparatively recent times, the country was densely wooded. Even now, traces of its earlier conditions are to be found in the old oak copses and irregular belts of timber that yet survive upon its slopes, and the hollow trunk trees that shade so many of its pastures. The forests have departed, but some old customs of their shades remain. Many, however, linger only in the metamorphosed or disguised form. The May Day dance, for instance, was to be discerned on the afternoon under notice, in the guise of the club revel, or club walking as it were there called. It was an interesting event to the younger inhabitants of Marlet, though its real interest was not observed by the participants in the ceremony. Its singularity lay less in the retention of a custom of walking in procession and dancing on each anniversary than in the members being solely women. In men's clubs, such celebrations were, though expiring, less uncommon, but either the natural shyness of the softer sex or a sarcastic attitude on the part of the male relatives had denuded such women's clubs as remained, if any other did, or this their glory and consummation. The Club of Marlott alone lived to uphold the local Cerealia. It had walked for hundreds of years, if not as benefit club, as votive sisterhood of some sorts, and and it walked still. The banded ones were all dressed in white gowns, a gay survival from old-style days, where cheerfulness and Maytime were synonyms, days before habit of taking long views had reduced emotions to a monotonous average. Their first exhibition of themselves was in the processional march of two round the parish. Ideal and real clashed slightly as the sun lit up their figures against the green hedges and creeper-laced house fronts, for though the whole troop wore white garments, no two whites were alike among them. Such approached pure plunking. Some had a bluish pallor, some worn by older characters, which had possibly lain by folded but for many years, inclined to a cadaverous tint and to a Georgian style. In addition to this distinction of a white frock, every woman and girl carried in her right hand a peeled willow wand, and in her left a bunch of white flowers. The peeling of the former and the selection of the latter had been an operation of personal care. There were a few middle-aged and even elderly women in the train, their silver wiry hair and wrinkled faces scorched by time and trouble, having almost a grotesque, certainly a pathetic appearance in such a jaunty situation. In a true view, perhaps there was more to be gathered and told of each anxious and experienced one, to whom the years were drawing nigh, when she should say, I have no pleasure in them, than of her juvenile comrades. But let the elder be passed over here for those under whose bodies life throbbed quick and warm. The young girls formed, indeed, the majority of the band, and their heads of luxuriant hair reflected in the sunshine every tone of cold black and brown. Some had beautiful eyes, others a beautiful nose, others a beautiful mouth and figure. Few, if any, had all. A difficulty of arranging their lips in this crude exposure to public scrutiny, an inability to balance their heads, and to dissociate self-consciousness from their features, was apparent in them, and showed that they were genuine country girls unaccustomed to many eyes. And each and all of them were warmed without by the sun, so each had a private little sun for her soul to bask in, some dream, some affection, some hobby, at least some remote and distant hope which, though perhaps starving to nothing, still lived on, as hopes will. They were all cheerful, many of them merry. They came round by the pure drop in, and were turning out of the high road to pass through a wicket gate into the meadows, when one of the women said, the Lord a Lord, why Tess Derbyfield, if there isn't thy father riding home, home, in a carriage? A young member of the band turned her head at the exclamation. She was a fine and handsome girl, not handsomer than some others possibly, but her mobile, puny mouth and large innocent eyes added elegance to colour and shape. She wore a red ribbon in her hair, and was only one of the white company who could boast of such pronounced adornment. As she looked round, Derbyfield was seen moving along the road in a chaise belonging to the pure trot, driven by a frizzle-headed brownie damsel with her gown cuffs rolled above her elbows. This was the cheerful servant of that establishment, who, in her part of factotum, turned groom and ostler at times. Derbyfield, leaning back and with his eyes closed luxuriously, was waving his hand above his head and singing in a slow recitative. I've caught a great family vault at Kingsbear, and knighted forefathers in lead coffins there. The clubbists tittered, except the girl called Tess, in whom a slow hate seemed to rise at the sense that her father was making himself foolish in their eyes. He's tired, that's all, she said hastily, and he has got a lift home because our own horse has to rest today. Bless thy simplicity, Tess, said her companions. He's got his market niche, ha ha. Look, look here. I won't walk another inch with you if you say any jokes about him, Tess cried, and colour upon her cheeks spread over her face and neck. In a moment her eyes grew moist and her glance dropped to the ground. Perceiving that they had really pained her, they said no more, and order again prevailed. Tess's pride would not allow her to turn her head again to learn what her father's meaning was, if he had any, and thus moved on with the whole body to the enclosure where there was to be dancing on the green. By the time the spot was reached, she had recovered her equanimity and tapped her neighbour with her wand and talked as usual. Tess Derbyfield at this time of her life was a mere vessel of emotion, untinctured by experience. The dialect was on her tongue to some extent, despite the village school, the characteristic intonation of that dialect for this district being the voicing, approximately rendered by the syllabus or you are, probably as rich an utterance as any to be found in human speech. The pouted up, deep red mouth to which this syllable was native had hardly as yet settled into its definite shape, but her lower lip had a way of thrusting the middle of her top up one upward when they closed together after a word. Such a weird thing to say, honestly. But okay, fine. Writers describe different things differently. We're not going to judge them, for the most part. Phases of her childhood lurked in her aspect still, as she walked along today, for all her bouncing handsomeness and handsome womanliness. You could sometimes see her 12th year in her cheek, or her ninth sparkling from her eyes, and even her fifth would flit over the curves of her mouth now and then. Yet few knew, and still fewer conceded this. A small minority, mainly strangers, would look long at her in casual passing by, and grow momentarily fascinated by her freshness, and wonder if they would ever see her again. But to almost everybody she was fine and picturesque country girl and normal. Nothing was seen or heard further of Derbyfield in his triumphal chariot under the conduct of Ostlers, and the club having entered the allotted space, dancing began. Space. As there were no men in the company, the girls danced at first with each other, but when the hour for the close of the labour drew on, the masculine inhabitants of the village, together with other idlers and pedestrians, gathered around the spot and appeared inclined to negotiate for a partner. Among these onlookers were three young men of a superior class, carrying small knapsacks strapped to their shoulders, and stout sticks in their hands. Their general likeness to each other and their consecutive ages would almost have suggested that they might be, what in fact they were, brothers. The eldest wore the white tie, high waistcoat, and thin-brimmed hat of the regulation curate. The second was the normal undergraduate. The appearance of the third and youngest would hardly have been sufficient to characterize him. There was an uncribbled, uncapilled aspect in his eyes and attire, implying that he had hardly as yet found the entrance of his professional groove, that he was a desultory, tentative student of something, and something might only have been predicted of him. These three brethren told casual acquaintance that they were spending their Whitsun holidays and walking tour through the Vale of Blackmoor, their course being southwesterly from the town of Shaston on the northeast. They leant over the gate by the Hardie and inquired as to the meaning of the dance and the white frock maids. The two elder of the brothers were plainly not intending to linger more than a moment, but the spectacle of a bevy of girls dancing without male partners seemed to amuse the third, and make him in no hurry to move on. He unstrapped his knapsack, put it on with a stick on the hedge bank, and opened the gate. "What are you going to do, Angel?" asked the eldest. "I'm inclined to go and have a fling with them. Why not all of us, just for a minute or two? It will not detain us long." "No, no, nonsense," said the first. "Dancing in public with a troop of country Houghtons. Suppose we should be seen. Come along, or it will be dark before we get to Stour Castle, and there's no place we can sleep at nearer than that. Besides, we must get through another chapter of a counterblast to agnosticism before we turn in. Now I have taken the trouble to bring the book." "All right, I'll overtake you and Cuthbert in 5 minutes. Don't stop. I give my word that I will, Felix." The two elder reluctantly left him and walked on, take their brother's knapsack to relieve him in the following, and the youngest entered the field. "This is 1,000 pities," he said gallantly to two or three of the girls nearest to him, as soon as there was a pause in the dance. "Where are your partners, my dears?" "They've not left off work yet," answered one of the boldest. "They'll be here by and by. Till then, will you be one, sir?" "Certainly. But what's one among so many? Better than none. This melancholy work, facing and footing it to one of your own sort, and no clipsing and calling at all. Now, pick and choose. Don't be so forward," said a shy girl. The young men, thus invited, glanced them over and attempted some discrimination, but as the group were all so new to him, he could not very well exercise it. He took almost the first that came to him, which was not the speaker, as she had expected, nor did it happen to be Tess Derbyfield. Pedigree, ancestral skeletons, monumental record. The Derbyville lineaments, lineaments did not help Tess in her life's battle as yet, even to the extent of attracting to her a dancing partner over the heads of the commonest peasantry. So much for Norman blood unaided by Victorian Lucia. The name of the eclipsing girl, whatever it was, has not been handed down, but she was envied by all as the first to enjoy the luxury of a masculine partner that evening. Yet such was the force of example that the village young men, who had not hastened to enter the gate while no intruder was in the way, now dropped in quickly. Soon the couples became leavened with rustic youth to a marked extent, till all the length the plainest woman in the cup was no longer compelled to foot it on the masculine side of the figure. The church clock struck, when suddenly the student said that he must leave. He had been forgetting himself. He had to join his companions. As he fell out of the dance, his eyes lighted on Tess Derbyfield, whose own large orbs were, to tell the truth, the faintest aspect of reproach that he had not chosen her. He too was sorry then that, owing to her backwardness, he had not observed her, and with that in his mind he left the pasture. On account of his long delay, he started in flying run down the lane westward. He had soon passed the hollow and mounted the next rise. He had not yet overtaken his brothers, but he had paused to get breath and looked back. He could see the white figures of the girls in the green enclosure whirling about as they had whirled when he was among them. They seemed to have quite forgotten him already. All of them except perhaps one. This white shade stood apart by the hedge alone. From her position, he knew it to be the pretty maiden with whom he had not danced. Trifling as the matter was, he yet instinctively felt that she was hurt by his oversight. He wished that he had asked her. He wished that he had inquired her name. She was so modest, so expressive. She had looked so soft in her thin white gown that he felt he had acted stupidly. However, it could not be helped, and turning and bending himself to a rapid walk, he dismissed the subject from his mind. All right, that was it. Chapter 2 of The Test of the Double Worlds. Bye.